is such a great question. No one's ever asked me that before or comment because I was very shy. And now I'm presenting in front of hundreds of people. And like,
Exactly.
this is the power of your mind. Like, this is
Yeah,
what I love
yeah.
to convey to people because I was not confident at all. You know, even starting out Kitchen Millie when I was 24, super nervous, right? Super uncertain in myself and in the product. And really how I built that confidence was getting rejected and having to continue anyway because I wanted to
Mhm.
make it work. And I would be in, situations where I was coming from the world of tech and I would tell people I started a cookie company and people would say, oh, that's cute, in like a very
Yeah,
condescending
yeah,
way.
yeah. I know what
Even
you
when
mean.
the business had a
Yeah.
team and was super successful, people would come to me and be like, what's your real job? All the time. And so like at first it really bothered me, but I had to build this confidence and like this
Yeah.
belief in myself. And I'm so glad you said that because I was super shy and I was not in control, that's the wrong word, not certain in
Yeah.
myself, confident, but I was able to build that. And the more and more you work on it with your mind and just kind of working on it daily, it can be really powerful.
Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of Trade Secrets by Tripletote. Today, we have a phenomenal guest who I'm glad to introduce you guys to and glad to get her story. Her name is Michelle Wax. Michelle, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. Now, for the viewers, just to let them know, listeners, readers, that we first connected when you were at UConn. You were a business student, majoring in management and entrepreneurship. And you helped me out so much, you and the team, just put together a good market research packet for my first invention, which was a baby carrier.
Yes, I remember. And that was such a blast because I feel like a lot of classes you don't really get really hands-on. So that
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
great time.
Yeah, I think credit to UConn for having programs and initiatives that help the public and small businesses and also give students real life experience about what it is to run a business because especially during this period of time in technology, the value of a college degree is being questioned, especially in business. And so those type of programs give students value that they really can use in the real world. But how you been? How's everything?
Everything's going well. I didn't see myself where I am today when I was in college, but in the best way possible. So have done a lot of different things and kind of figured out where I truly want to be, which is what I'm doing now. So it's been going good.
That's pretty great. So after, when you did the project, were you in your senior year, junior year?
I believe I was a senior, yeah.
And did you go on to further school after UConn?
I did not know. So in between my junior and senior year, I had an internship at a tech startup here in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
which is where I live now. And from there, I was able to get a job after graduation. So UConn was it. So yeah.
Nice. Now, where'd you work at right after college?
So they recently got acquired by Grubhub. The company was called LevelUp, and they did mobile payments and ordering for mainly restaurant groups.
Mm-hmm.
So like you would go into a restaurant and you'd have a custom white label app from that company, and you could earn loyalty points and pay with your phone through it.
Nice. How
Yeah.
was that experience in general? How'd you like it?
It was great. I really enjoyed it. I was working I started out in support and then I moved to project and account management, which I really enjoyed because it was my first introduction really to working with a lot of CEOs and CMOs and kind of seeing what their top priorities were.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a great team. It was a fairly young company. So it was about, 80 people, very startup culture. So I really enjoyed that because that's what I had always wanted to be in.
That's excellent. So after that, you were there for about 2 or 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, what happened next?
Yeah, so I was there about 3 years after graduation. And my dream since I was a kid was to have a company in the food business. I thought I wanted to own a bakery or something like that.
That's cool.
And have always been into entrepreneurship. That was my minor at UConn. And I had, the lemonade stand when I was growing up. Me and my brothers, we would make lemonade, but also bake cookies along with the lemonade and sell them. And it was like the best
Nice.
time in the world. And so I had always wanted to start a business and thought would wait until, I had, 10 years experience and a bit more capital. I still had student loans and car payments and rent and everything
Yeah.
that people have. And so I reached this point where I had been doing a lot of research and kind of just for, I think, almost a year, just kind of like poking around on government websites, seeing what permits I would need. And finally one day I was like, you know what, Michelle, let's just start small and see what happens. And so I got all the permits needed, the licenses needed to start Kitchen Millie, which started out as just selling at local farmers markets and into retail shops around the area. And then quickly was able to pivot it a little bit to make it more profitable than just selling to farmers markets and wholesale. And so pivoted it to cookie catering and events, which sounds ridiculous, but we only did cookie themed things. So we would go into companies and do make your own cookie witches with local ice cream, beer and cookie pairings, and cookie related, and was able to grow that over a course of about 4.5 years to be the top dessert catering company here in Boston, with a great team. And that was a great experience. And along the way, when I needed a bigger commercial kitchen space, I ended up signing a lease for a property right outside of Boston, Arlington, Mass, and quickly realized that I had a business partner in that space. And we quickly realized she had another food company that we weren't using that space as efficiently that we really could, or all the time. And so we started renting that out to other local businesses here in Boston that needed a place to produce their product. And a lot of people were coming to us. They had a great product, like they were really good at baking or making whatever, cashew milk or whatever it was, but they weren't as familiar with the business side of things. And so thankfully I'd made a lot of mistakes when I was starting out Kitchen Millie. And so we started to share those through doing workshops and series and other types of events to teach the business side of things to help people start and grow their companies.
That's awesome. So let's unpack that a little bit. So you were working for a company, doing well, loving the company, it wasn't a bad thing, but you had this desire inside you, this passion to have to try and try your hand at this thing. And so you started it part-time while you were working so that you could still handle, your bills and stuff like that. Now, to get the cookies made, because some people like that are watching, they may be able to make a cake. Some people make cakes for their friends. They may make cookies. They can cook. Explain how you went from just having this concept to actually making the cookies. Was it at your house, or did you actually rent out a kitchen? Like, how did you get started, just the process of making cookies in a large quantity to start?
Sure. So I did start from I got my kitchen license here at my house. Some states allow for that. It's called a residential kitchen license. Some states don't. It kind of depends on what area you're in. So I'd look that up first. And that's only available for non-perishable, not non-perishable, non-potentially hazardous foods. So anything that's baked or like candy or granola, you can do that from a residential kitchen. If you're working with meat or dairy or things that need to be refrigerated, generally you do need a commercial kitchen to start out. So just depending on the product, you can contact the Board of Health for that. But I reached a point where, it's like a standard oven that I have here that's in anyone's house, right? So it can only be so efficient. That's right. I reached the point personally where that was kind of the limit I could do. So I could keep it in that small kind of contained side business area, which is totally fine, obviously. But I kind of reached the point where I'm like, you know what? I might as well try to grow it and see what happens. And so that's when I took the step to actually rent out a commercial kitchen. And we actually had to build it out. It was kind of a production. I ran a Kickstarter for it. But there are other commercial kitchens that, similar to how we started renting it out, there are other commercial kitchens that already exist where you could just rent out, a time slot, which is a good starting point as well.
Now, when you rented out this kitchen, were you still working at your job full time to also supplement your income while you were still building out this big thing?
I was not. So about 1.5 years into Kitchen Millie, I decided there was a change in management at my job, and the new manager, we didn't really, the manager styles didn't really work. And she was basically like the opposite of my other manager. So it was a good point where my brother, I called it my brother, I remember, and he was like, Michelle, you can always get another job, but if you don't try now, you're never going to know. And so that's kind of, obviously a variety of factors, but that kind of pushed me to take this step to sign that lease.
Now, how'd you feel? What were the, I understand what the drive was, which is tremendous drive. You've been wanting to do this since you were very little. What about the fears? What fears did you have when stepping out completely on your own and leaving a job behind?
I love that you asked that because I feel like not enough people talk about it. It was nerve-wracking. And for me, the biggest part was the financial aspect of it, right? Because I still had student loans, I had my car, I had rent to pay and everything like that. And I didn't have much money, right? When I did that, I was 25, 26. So I'd never really had, I didn't have that much in savings that I could kind of fall back on if needed. And it's like, I mean, I'm sure with entrepreneurship, it's like a lot of ups and downs.
Oh, yeah.
But for that, I very distinctly remember driving to sign the lease for that property and just like panicking inside, and I feel like I'm a generally calm person. I generally manage stress pretty well. And I was just having this like, anxious feeling within myself and just like keep moving forward. And there were times where, month by month, sometimes you get really nervous, but I feel like if you're pushing forward and you keep working at it, like, there's going to be points where you're really low. Maybe it's financially or in some other way, but it always tends to raise back up again if you believe.
So I'm gonna ask you a real good question, and not good because I'm good at asking questions, but good because it'll bring value. How did you reason with yourself that I'm signing a lease, whether it's for a year, and a lot of times commercial leases are for multi-year. So I'm signing a lease, and I'm committed, and I don't even know. I officially do not know, but I believe that this thing is going to work out. How did you reason to sign it anyway? Were you just like, screw it, if it don't work here, they'll just have to take the L? Like, how did you reason that in your mind, not knowing that this business was going to grow and be big?
Yeah, and especially in the food industry, there's some crazy stat where it's like 95% fail,
Yeah.
And so there's that going on. There's all these, self-doubt and stuff happening in my head, like with anything. But my dad said something to me way back that I think is always stuck in my mind in that. And I remember I was like going in for an interview somewhere and I was kind of freaking out previous to that, a couple years previously. But he said to me, he's like, Michelle, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people have gone through this before. They figured it out. Even if they fell on their face, they got back up again. Odds are they're not homeless or they didn't die from it. So like you can come back too, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of just go into everything with now is like, I'll figure it out. And there's always going to be that self-doubt and lack of confidence in some area, but that's something I've really worked to build over time is that confidence and mindset has been really powerful as I continued on from the journey into what I'm doing now.
And I think the one thing you're bringing up for the first time on my podcast with all the people I've been able to talk to, they all have different perspectives and they usually each have a highlight. So I think your highlight is, in my opinion, that you have had a conditioning, whether you weren't prepared for that first moment, maybe with Kitchen Millie, but you've developed a conditioning to that. I see there's a fire, but I still can run into the burning building because I condition myself on how to format my mind to make myself do it anyway. And that's huge because a lot of people, they have ideas that if the idea doesn't work out, they didn't sign a lease, they have nothing to lose. The idea may be practical enough to start, but they still have this fear from whatever type of inputs in their mind or their self-doubt that they cannot pull the trigger. But you sound like you've conditioned yourself even from a young age to be able to find a angle to embrace a fear and burst through it. So on the other side though, what practical things did you put in place, whether it was saving or did you have a plan A for the way you want it to come out, but if it don't come out that way, I'll do plan B to make it come out right? Like, did you have layers of plans? How did you, on a practical side, prepare yourself for any hardships?
Yeah, and I think for, being an entrepreneur in general is like the biggest thing other than belief and confidence in yourself, building that within you, is the ability to adapt. And what happened is that I noticed very quickly that obviously food industry is known for having very small margins in general. And I noticed quickly that was the case with me as well. And I did have a certain number in my bank account that I said, I can live off of this for 6 months should
Mm-hmm.
everything just completely plummet.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that amount, and granted, I was, living on my own. I don't have children. I don't have, a family myself. So I didn't have to provide for anyone else besides
Mm-hmm.
myself. So it's obviously different depending on that, but I had that amount of money, and then, very just quickly adapted to the opportunity where there was opportunity to make more. So like when I said we started renting out the kitchen, initially we weren't going to do that. We were just going to use it for our production space and to have a storefront.
Mm-hmm.
We noticed the foot traffic wasn't very good. People weren't really coming in. And we noticed there was a need for commercial kitchen space because we were in Boston and it was very expensive and there wasn't enough of it. So we started renting it out. We started teaching the series and classes, which brought in money. I pivoted Kitchen Millie entirely, stopped doing farmers markets, stopped selling to local stores because I saw that corporate companies had a lot more money to spend and it used less packaging, which was the most cost draining aspect of the business itself. And so was able to just quickly adapt and lean into what was driving the most profit and focus mostly on that in terms of marketing and outreach and things like that.
So now you've basically, you created a foundation of security by pivoting, by creating other sources of income, even though it's not cookies per se, but you're still using the resources you have, whether it be your experience or your physical location to generate funds. Talk about growth. Now, how did you grow? Like, how did you get more business? First step you're saying is going to corporations where they have deeper pockets / you can lower your expenses because now you're doing a volume play. How else did you grow from a marketing standpoint? How did you let more people know about what you were doing faster?
Yeah, so for us, we had, there's a bunch of catering. So I rebranded as cookie catering, dessert catering. And there's a bunch of catering platforms, which obviously they'll take a cut of the sale, but they'll send you sales from companies. And so that automatically was, 20% more sales by using a platform like that. Doing collaborations with people, if you're not in food or in that industry, has been powerful. And it was testing out a lot of different things and seeing what worked best. Cold emails sometimes actually worked. And it was just kind of finding people on LinkedIn that was an office manager or the administrative assistant, whoever was ordering food for the company, and reaching out to them and saying, this is what we have. Another thing that I really played into with the catering was pitching around kind of more ridiculous holidays that companies are looking to bring some excitement and perks into. And I'm in Boston, so there's a lot of tech companies. They have that generally younger audience that are looking for those perks. And so Employee Appreciation Day was always a big day for us, things like that, and just being aware of what's going on. I also quickly, when I did have the funds to hire someone, I realized I don't really like baking, which is very shocking to a lot of people because they're like,
no, I'm familiar.
Most people assume I went to culinary school or was a pastry chef. Yeah. And I realized I just really didn't like that component. I like the business side of things more. And so that was another aspect that allowed me to focus more on sales, was having someone who was actually producing the product or a couple people, and then I could worry about and focus on what I was best at versus.
Now when you say hire, for people again that are starting out, did you hire full time? Do you mean hire like you had a person that if you needed to, they said, call me if you need me? How was the actual hiring when you were doing it?
So I've always had very little funds. Like I've always bootstrapped, never gotten investment. And so I have always started part-time. So for me personally, it was really just production of the product because it was fairly straightforward product, cookies. And so it was mainly just producing that and delivering it was what I needed help with. And so what I had was a standard schedule. We generally bake Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And luckily, I hired someone early on in the business to help with social media. And it actually, she was just an amazing person, Louisa. And she was able to go from just handling social media a couple hours a week to basically managing the entire operations when I was traveling for filming the documentary American Happiness, which is my latest project. But yeah, so I encourage people to always start as small with like as little as you can. Obviously you want to pay people a good wage, but as minimal as you can to get that baseline. Yeah.
Now, from the cookie company, how did that end up propelling you to your second venture?
Yeah, so I reached a point where externally everything looked to be going really well, right? I had great clients, I had a great team. This is what I thought I'd wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
with my life. And I found myself personally waking up and feeling stressed out for what seemed like no reason. I found myself with a lot of self-doubt and worry, and I just mentally didn't understand it because I'd worked really hard, and like my whole life I'd been told you work hard, you get what you want, and then you'll be happy, right? And I just wasn't there, and I felt very guilty about that because I knew objectively I had all this good in my life, but
Yeah.
I reached this point of real frustration where I thought I should be happier. And so that's when I personally got interested in how the brain's wired and how that affects your happiness, your mindset, your fulfillment really in life, and started implementing strategies into my own life to really go from a place of waking up stressed and worried to feeling more energized and excited for the day ahead. And I was looking for a change because I I don't know if it was just my personality or maybe it was just the point that I was at, but I kind of everything was streamlined and going well, but I just was ready for something new. And it was this internal struggle for a while because as I'm sure you know, like you build something and it's so close to you. And a lot of people, including my family, didn't understand why I would want to walk away from it. But I felt this like
Yeah.
internal thing.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on something very big here, because this is the case with society in general. Whether it's a job and you're like, you make so much great money, you have a nice family, you drive a nice car, you live in a great neighborhood. What is wrong? Why can't you get to happy? And then a person could be an entrepreneur making, finally got this thing off the ground, which people, you would think that, oh my God, you did this terribly hard thing, seemingly risky thing, and you pulled it off. Why aren't you happy? And I think that people, they leave with no answer, right? They leave like, I don't know why I don't feel happy.
Yeah.
And when we see people that are uber successful and maybe they're happy from best we can see, they always talk about the journey, being happy with the journey. And whether your journey is working at a fast food restaurant, which that was my first job, whether I worked at a brickyard stacking bricks in the hot Georgia sun, I worked telemarketing, but sometimes finding an angle, even if it's just one angle to focus on as you come to these different situations, a job paying less can be way more fun and fulfilling than a job that's, in corporate America, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're feeling this way, like everybody does, what were the specific things you began to do to alleviate the stress and the heaviness of your days?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really, when I started digging into the neuroscience and like actually understanding that our brains are wired to go to that place of stress and not feeling as happy naturally, um, I also learned that your brain is constantly changing. So you can actually rewire your mind to build that belief in positivity. And that's what I credit for being like where I am today, because I really
Yes.
work on that daily. And really what I was doing was I was first becoming self-aware of what I truly wanted, which I know
Mm-hmm.
sounds very basic, but like you were saying, I think that you get to a certain point in your life where you think that's what you just should be doing,
Yeah.
or you shouldn't, walk away because it seems too risky or whatever it is. And taking a step back and determining what's making me happy right now and what isn't can be really powerful. And then from that, it's shifting a mindset of two people can be in the exact same situation and be interpreting it completely different. And that's been the most powerful piece in my life, is being able to step back, go to a place of what can I appreciate in this moment, even
Mm-hmm.
when things are going awry. Like
Mm-hmm.
in the kitchen incubator space, the local fair, I had, some run-ins, unfortunately, that happened between me and my business partner that not ideal, could really plummet someone else. But I was constantly shifting my mind to look for, okay, what can I learn from this? What's the
Yeah.
opportunity here? And I think kind of having that practical optimism and being able to choose to see the good in the moment or see the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity can be really, really powerful. And it's obviously easier said than done, especially when
Yeah.
external events aren't great. But I credit a positive mindset and training my mind for that for pretty much everything in my life.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And the one thing I know for me personally, I know everybody's different, but for me personally, the first thing even if I'm physically ill, like coming down with the cold, the first, my first action that I know I can take for me is I clear everything out. So if my life is stressed, it's like, okay, what can I start to dump? Okay, I can dump this, or I can dump hanging out here, or I can, I just immediately try to clean house to get literally clear. Like, okay, all that's in the house is me and this and that. Now, how can I begin to build back up? You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, when I don't know what the solution is for everybody, of course, but a lot of people, when they even come to that realization that they need to make a change, the difficulty comes in, but I got this and I got that. And you do have that. You actually do have kids. You actually do have bills, and you have a job, and you're married, and you probably have family stress. Like, these things are actually real. And it's hard a lot of times to find an angle to get clarity or to get space. But if a person can do that and then jump into a routine, because we all feel it, and
Right.
it's so important. And then the happiness thing, how did that develop to become something that you're now taking on full time?
Yeah, so that's like a perfect lead in, because I had seen a massive shift in my own life by implementing these things I had learned. And I had this crazy idea. I was like, what if I could capture, like you were saying, everyone has stuff going on in their life. And what if I could capture everyday people, not someone who's necessarily super rich or
Understood.
successful, but everyday people? How are they creating this happiness and fulfillment, regardless of those external circumstances, right? Because there's always the interpretation, and there's
That's right.
always things happening that are less than ideal. And so I had this idea to go to every state in America and film the American Happiness documentary. And that's what I did, to really capture these stories of everyday Americans from all walks of life. And like you were saying, I was chatting with people who had stage 3 cancer, or their house
Mm,
got blown away by a tornado, or they've been in jail, or they just didn't like their job, right? I wanted to get like a variety of different external things that
yeah.
different people could relate to, and share, yes, even though these things are not great, what can I do internally to drive that happiness? And as I did more and more research into this, it's been shown through science that only 10% of your happiness levels is dependent on external things like your income or where you live or your relationship
Understood.
status. The majority is how your brain's interpreting your situation. And that's why, like you were saying, someone super rich or successful, quote unquote, can be miserable and burnt
Hmm.
out all the time. And on the other side of that, people who have lost everything and have gone through a lot can be the most generous and happy people you know. And that's because it's not actually those external factors. It's primarily your brain and how you're interpreting your
Wow.
life.
And what do you find are the commonalities in a person that is having difficulty finding happiness often enough? Like, what do you find are the common high level things that they're experienced or experiencing, or the thoughts they're thinking? Like, what do you find the commonalities are?
In terms of they haven't reached happiness or they're
That's
complaining
right.
about it.
That's right. That's right.
What I've discovered, because a lot of people I chatted with too, they used to be like that and then they had a shift. And really
Mm,
what it was becoming self-aware of what that is. And like, we're never really taught this in school, or at least I wasn't, how to
yeah.
actually handle that. And we're taught that external things are going to bring that happiness. And so it's number one, becoming self-aware of what you truly want, not what you think you should be doing. That was a
Mm,
major theme. And I think a lot of people that aren't as happy as they could be, they haven't determined that yet. Or they've determined it, but they think they can't do it. And the second part of that is really blaming either someone else or, an external situation for their happiness. Because if you're counting on someone else, either it's your relationship or your
hmm.
family or
Hmm.
whatever, coworkers, or an external situation like your income or your job, those things are always out of your control, really. And so it's important to focus on what you can control, because we crave that as human beings, which is your perspective on it. And so having those two shifts were really powerful in the with the people I interviewed.
So now you are teaching as many people as possible the things that you've learned, and you're learning more at the same time. So how did you get into being able to communicate this to corporations, or to be able to, like, tell me the business side of what you do? How did you get yourself to a point where you were able to get booked to speak at these different places?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as I was traveling filming the documentary, I was speaking at colleges, really sharing the knowledge and the journey. And I came back to Boston, where I'm from, and just along the way, I was chatting with all these people, and I discovered there was a real hunger for this information out there because, as I mentioned earlier, I personally was never taught how to be
Mhm.
happy with where you're at today, right?
And were you speaking for free to get started?
I spoke at I tried to get paid wherever I could. Occasionally I didn't, mainly at like public schools. They didn't have the funds sometimes
Understood. Hmm.
for groups, but it varied. So if they weren't paying me, I asked them for a testimonial so I could kind of leverage that later on.
Yeah.
And then I came back to Boston, and I started to build out different workshops and programs, and really just started to, how did I get the first client? I reached out to the people I knew that were at companies, asking if they
Gotcha.
could connect me to someone, in HR generally or operations, to chat with them. And really what I'm sharing is the mental wellness component, because mental health is kind of, unfortunately a stigma to it.
Yeah.
Even though you could have really great mental health or poor mental health, everyone has it. But it's kind of showcased generally as being this negative, dark thing. And so sharing how, especially now with everything going on, what I've been doing is doing remote workshops to help build mental wellness while working from home. So, building positive habits and sharing the science of
Yes.
happiness with corporations and also schools and universities too.
That's pretty awesome. What's on the horizon for you? What things are you looking forward to in the next 12 to 18 months?
So I'm really excited to continue doing the workshops because I really just started to ramp those up in January. So it's pretty
Mhm.
recent. Um, and I also am just about done editing the documentary. So just about done, still in post-production, but my plan for that is to submit it to film festivals for this. The applications for most open in May, so for this summer.
Yes.
And depending on that, then release the documentary and hopefully get it on a platform like Netflix or Hulu. And those are the two things I'm really most excited about. The other thing I've been doing is doing happiness hour community events to bring people together. So obviously right now people aren't coming physically together, but have been doing that via Zoom to help build community a little bit more, because when I was traveling, I kept hearing that people want to be around more positive people, and they also want to be around, or they want real connection. Because I know I've personally been to a lot of events where you might meet someone great, but you probably never see them again.
That's right. I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
So with the happiness hours, I'm trying to kind of cultivate that more so people can form a little bit deeper connection.
Oh, great. I have one question. This is on my own personal curiosity. When we worked together, when you were working with the Yukon team and doing the market research, I pegged you as shy. Was I wrong, or have you changed as a result of your evolution, or was it just because the group dynamic, or have you always just been like a assassin?
That is such a great question. No one's ever asked me that before or comment, because yes, I was very shy. And now I'm presenting in front of hundreds of people, and like,
Exactly.
this is the power of your mind. Like, this is
Yeah,
what I love
yeah.
to convey to people, because I was not confident at all. Even starting out Kitchen Millie when I was 24, super nervous, right? Super uncertain in myself and in the product. And really how I built that confidence was getting rejected, and having to continue anyway because I wanted to
Mhm.
make it work. And I would be in, situations where I was coming from the world of tech, and I would tell people I started a cookie company, and people would say, "Oh, that's cute," in like a very
Yeah,
condescending
yeah,
way.
yeah. I know what
Even
you
when
mean.
the business had a
Yeah.
team that was super successful, people would come to me and be like, "What's your real job?" All the time. And so like at first it really bothered me, but I had to build this confidence and like this
Yeah.
belief in myself. And I'm so glad you said that, because I was super shy and I was not in control, that's the wrong word, not certain in
Yeah.
myself, confident, but I was able to build that. And the more and more you work on it with your mind and just kind of working on it daily, it can be really powerful. So
Yeah, and I purposely used the picture I used in the article as a result to just show the what's the word? The dichotomy, or just the idea that this sweet picture you see, She's an assassin. Don't get it twisted. So I purposely used the picture, and it says the juxtaposition of the picture of that super all-American girl face, but on the side of a giant metal building inside of a giant jumbotron. Like,
Yeah.
don't get it twisted. And that's why I love that picture the most when I was using it for the article.
Yeah, and I feel like that's very much my personality. I'm wearing like a pig scrunchie and a bright shirt, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like I feel like I would kind of dull myself down a little bit more because I'm like, oh, you have to be professional. Not that that's not professional, but like you have to wear a suit
Understood.
and whatever. And that wasn't me. And so I reached a point it took me a while to build this confidence in myself, but I was like, this is who I am. This is, my personality comes through best like this. And so just leaning into, once you figure out who you are, who you want to be, just pushing into that as much as possible.
Great. Hey, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. The information you gave a lot of perspective. A lot of times I get business steps, which is great. People need to know the steps. Sometimes I get the perspective on the emotion behind, and today you gave both. So I believe that, again, the readers, listeners, and viewers will have a lot of value from checking out your interview. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. This was such a blast.
Awesome. Have a good one. And thank you again for tuning in, guys. And we'll be back next week with another interview. Thank you.